Ronald is an experienced IP, trademark design, and copyright professional who currently holds the post of Intellectual Property Director, Trademarks at GT International. He's worked in the area of fast-moving consumer goods, consumer electronics, healthcare, telecom, and tobacco. He's joined GT International in 2012, right, Ronald?
Right.
And he's worked earlier with Philips and Unilever. And of course, he's been the president of the IMTA in 2016. Next up, we have Cecilia, who's been with IKEA for 25 years. And she's currently responsible for, essentially development and enforcement of the worldwide trademark strategies, portfolio management and litigation management of IKEA. She's responsible for recruiting and managing IKEA's outside counsel in 80 countries, and also works on the business units with the business units on IP matters and in the IKEA retail environment. So welcome to you as well, Cecilia.
Thank you.
Varun is the Associate General Counsel, Varun Menon, Associate General Counsel in Middle East and Africa, HMD Global. He also has roles, a similar role in India and the SST countries, but today he's primarily going to talk about his experience in the Middle East because the session is on Europe and the Middle East. He has about 14 years of experience in the telecom sector. He's been working in the mobile and telecom industry in relation to drafting and negotiating commercial agreements. He looks at business integration, regulatory compliances, employment issues, e-commerce, and litigation in the region. So welcome, Varun. And I'm Shweta Sri Majumdar. I'm the managing partner of Fidus Law Chambers, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. And we're essentially going to get all of our speakers to talk to us about how COVID has changed the way they work, how it's made them rethink IP, rethink the way they do business. And while we wait for Jonas to dial in, I'm going to go straight to you, Ronald. So tell us, what has COVID meant for you and for JT and the industry as a whole? What has been your experience so far?
So my experience so far has been, well, personally, it's been okay. I think the key thing for everybody on this call is presumably that their families and themselves are safe and healthy. And as long as that is the case, I think everything else is manageable in a way. If I look at my company and my industry, we had a good first quarter, which was announced last year, but there was also of last week, sorry. But there was already also a note to say that the global impact is probably more visible from April. So for the rest of the year, it's difficult to predict what's gonna happen. What we've already seen is if you sell fast-moving consumers goods, I mean the entire logistics, your supply chain, everything obviously is affected or can be affected. So it's anything from increased health and safety measures that we've implemented in the entire supply chain, factories, R&D centers, distribution networks. Something practical. I mean the practical consequences of lockdowns. Supply of your product to the selling points. If you look at our industry as a whole, I mean, everyone who ever travels and has been to an airport knows that tobacco products are sold in duty free. Obviously, that is highly impacted by what's happening. And as many other industries will also experience, there's been a move to online sales more so than probably in the past, to the extent that that's allowed for our type of products.
Okay. And what about you, Cecilia? I mean, obviously, the challenges for your industry obviously has been that furniture, and that too, the way you do business is something that involves a lot of interpersonal interaction. And so what has this meant for the business and for the industry generally?
Well, I think that the biggest issue obviously was that now almost all of our stores are closed. And this was then in two different waves. So we first had the big issue in China, starting from more or less from Christmas. Most of our suppliers are located in China. So we already had a problem going back to the beginning of the year. Now the stores in Europe and the US are closed. And obviously this is let's say, very difficult times for us. One good thing that it has brought, though, is that when you talk about e-commerce, this is something that we've been struggling for years, how to discuss how we do this, the different countries, how do we actually implement it. And it was interesting to see that many of the franchisees in the different countries, they really stepped up their game very, very quickly. And it was good to see that, they've been all able to do some decent numbers on their sales e-commerce. Of course, it's not something that's going to weigh up the lack of sales in the physical sales channels, but of course. So I think that e-commerce is something that's going to set a big, it's going to be a big trace from this time. And another thing that I can see within IKEA is the need for increased corporate social responsibility. We work a lot with showing people that we actually care and we share. And obviously people are spending more times in their homes. So this is our area of expertise. And I think that the online presence, and I'm not talking about sales necessarily, but the online presence of showing people that we are here and we're there to help people. I think that has been quite an important realization for us all.
Sure. Thank you, Cecilia. I do want to take this opportunity to welcome our fourth speaker, Jonas, who's unfortunately had to join us on the phone because of technical glitches. So we don't get to see his video feed, but he's very much with us. Jonas Kohl is the group trademarks. He's the general counsel trademarks, and he heads up the group trademarks function in the Merck Group, based in Darmstadt in Germany. He's responsible for the worldwide protection, administration, and defense of all trademarks, designs, and copyrights of the Merck Group. He's a member of PTMG and INTA. Welcome, Jonas.
Yes, welcome. I'm really sorry that I have that technical hiccup, but I'm happy to at least join you by phone.
Thank you, Jonas. So tell us, Jonas, you're probably the only speaker on the panel today whose industry is covered in the essential goods category. What has that meant in the light of COVID? And, has it still been challenging for you, or is it business as usual?
So, well, of course, it's very challenging times for the whole industry, the healthcare industry. And by the way, we are not only healthcare, but life science and performance materials as well. So we sell a lot of lab equipment to other pharmaceutical companies. And of course, it's products which are essential to fight the pandemic. It's products which you need to develop a vaccine or to do the testing, which is done worldwide. And in that regard, you might say we benefit somewhat from the crisis, but believe me or not, the company has been hit hard in a way that we have that lockdown. Of course, manufacturing is ongoing, but we see big challenges in supply chain. And as we do a lot of medicine for diseases which have not been stopped, of course, one of our number one priority is to supply these to the markets as well, and especially with the border closures we had in Europe and more or less the lockdown of transportation, we faced some challenges. Overall, the working in headquarters, there we had a lockdown as well, at least for the office functions. Manufacturing is ongoing, which is good, but we are by far not in a normal working mode.
Sure. Thank you, Jonas. And now over to you, Varun.
Yes, I mean, we would have loved from a mobile perspective, for all mobile devices to be, essential products all around the world. But, clearly that's not, going to happen. But yeah, I mean, from our perspective, from an industry perspective, short term, we've clearly noticed that retail points of sale, all that will certainly see a lower footfall, lower number of people coming into these points of sale to malls. That's certainly going to affect sales and the sales forecast for the industry in the short term. I don't think there's any question about that. Again, this is despite mobile phone being a very important aspect of everybody's life. For communication, for ordering products, for practically everything we need, we use a mobile device. But even then, we as industry can possibly see, I think, a downturn for the short period, for the next few months. We're only going to know that impact, of course, over the next few months. We've had issues, I think, from the supply chain perspective, from China. I think that's been very clear, since a lot of the supply chain, the components, the manufacturing is all based out of China. So that's clearly something that has impacted the industry in the short term. So, we do expect portfolio planning, product planning, all that to kind of take that into consideration as well. Components, spare parts, all that does come from places like China. So we do see some, clear impact there. Discretionary spending will go down. I think this is across all sectors. So if people don't have, they don't get their bonuses generally across, most sectors, they don't get, if their salaries are impacted, then they may not necessarily upgrade to the next phone or, want the flagship phone. So that's something as an industry we'd have to take into consideration as well. So yes, do we see a short-term impact? Yes, we would definitely see these aspects.
That's a great point. I think that probably brings me round to each one of you to talk about what you see should be our strategy as lawyers to think about overall reduced budgets. I mean, within businesses, there's going to be a reduction of budgets. So naturally, that's going to percolate down to legal teams. But I mean, if, for example, you were to advise somebody who's listening in and who belongs to an in-house team, and they had to plan for trying to do the same thing on a reduced budget, what are the kind of tips that you would give them? Because I'm sure that's something each one of you is grappling with at the current moment, because spend is going down, therefore, profit baselines are clearly impacted. Ronald, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things is, we talk about online all the time. And I think if you look at our industry and online, I think don't underestimate the tools that are available out there with free information that get updated all the time. INTA members look at the resources. I've pitched this before, and I will continue to pitch this message. There's a wealth of information out there. So be smart in how you obtain your information. I would say, first and foremost, to the extent that you're at home now and maybe waiting more for the business to contact you, go out there, be proactive and talk to the business and ask them, what are your immediate and your short-term priorities and how have they changed, so that you can align your IP strategy, your protection strategy, and your enforcement strategy accordingly, always bearing in mind, of course, that, and IP is an investment in the future, right? So do make sure that you still spend resources on what is key to your business. Don't make over hasty decisions now. But if you need to really clamp down on the work, cut the dead wood. Look at what case you've had pending for 8, 10, 12 years, whatever. See if you can get out of it. And I would say that's it. Really, talk to the business, strategize, prioritize, and the focus will come from that. And if that also means a saving, and because you're required to do so, great. But I think this is a rule that you should always apply. Every now and then, look with a very critical eye about what you're doing. Never get on the autopilot anyway as an in-house person. I think because that's it.
Sure, that's a great point. So talking about deadwood, Cecilia, you're managing 80 countries. Right?
Yeah.
So do you, when you're deciding deadwood, are you just looking at cases which have been pending for a long time, or are you also then prioritizing jurisdiction wise? How do you determine priorities at a time like this?
I think we haven't, considering our situation, we've had some budget cuts, and I think that what we're looking at first is internally. We're cutting consultants, we're cutting secondments, which means that we still have the same amount of work, but we're going to be fewer people doing the work. And I think that, just as Ronald said, we're discussing with business because we need to make a plan for what are we going to do until the end of the fiscal year now with the budget that we have. And there are things that we will not be able to continue doing, certain projects or tasks that we just can't continue doing. And of course, that will, in the next stage, it will most likely come to certain jurisdictions where we feel that, you know, we need to put the brakes on here and concentrate on other more challenging jurisdictions. So I think it's a combination of really trying to look at what you're doing and see whatever you can postpone or scrap altogether. We will be very busy with trying to really take out the essential things that we need to carry on doing here.
And what about you, Yunus? How would you realign your priorities?
Well, I guess it's somehow a combination of what has been mentioned already. Of course, we are trying to look and then to cut all our dead wood we are having. But I strongly believe myself that it's always a portfolio cleaning which will help to strategize and prioritize the cost you spend. Yeah. So as we are in part of the pharma industry, we file on a broad basis and we file a lot of reserve candidates. And we do that more or less on a global scale. And if we talk about global, it's sometimes 150 plus countries. What we do more and more is that we really have categories of countries where we say this is a must-have, and other countries might then be of less priority. And of course, you enforce those measures now. And talking about reserve marks, again, you do less than maybe you would do in other economic times. Yeah.
Sure. And before I flip to you, Varun, just a quick housekeeping point for everyone who's listening in. If there are questions that are on your mind that you'd like to ask the speakers, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can send us your questions. We will take a few listener questions towards the end of the session. So please feel free to shoot your questions there, not in the chat, but in the Q&A bar. So Varun, coming back to you. Reduce budget, what are your top tips?
Yeah, I mean, the sales and marketing teams in our organization would clearly, cut out all the dead wood. They would clearly concentrate on the portfolio planning. So they will have a clear way forward and we will support that. But from an in-house perspective, I think what we're looking at in the immediate term is the impact of COVID on our business. So it's to immediately support that. And this could mean about, looking at the government regulations, looking at the lockdown orders in various countries that we've had, when you can open sales, where you can sell, whether online is allowed, travel orders, labor issues that will come up. So I think our current focus right now due to COVID-19 is on these particular issues. Very clearly. We also have to prioritize, I think, business continuity plans. We've had situations where, a simple example would be like call center services, support services for our mobiles. Now, a lot of these people are situated in various parts of the world with dedicated centers, dedicated offices. The question is now, do you have them work from home? What does that do to the kind of service level? So that's something we've been supporting the business as well, prioritizing that, very keenly, because business continuity is an essential component here. Yes, budgets are tight. We've been told to keep an eye on costs. So that means, not engaging too much, perhaps with outside counsels as we might have prior to this COVID-19 situation. So we might focus on the key tasks, key essentials in getting that done. So yes, the focus is to keep a tight rein on the budgets and to only do what the business absolutely requires for the short term right now.
So at least what I've heard you and Cecilia say is that, you clearly find yourselves doing a lot more in the process. You find the legal teams doing a lot more in the process of keeping costs down. Now, how do you balance that with, all of the challenges of working from home? So at least two of you on the panel here today have young children. That's Varun and Jonas. Has that been a challenge, the whole work from home scenario? And I mean, has it been business as usual? Do you find that, you and the rest of your team has been productive in the work from home scenario? Or do you see that as challenging? Have you welcomed it or not?
Well, I can go first here. I mean, I think business work from home is a great concept. I think it works. I think the idea that people who work from home perhaps didn't put in the same kind of effort and time that those in office, they perhaps put more effort and time. I think that thinking has kind of gone away now. I've been very fortunate to work for organizations where they have been flexible about this. So I've had opportunities to work from home. It's never been an issue. I think, as I mentioned to you prior to starting this meeting, the work from home from a COVID situation has been very different because I think everybody's working from home. So you have, you're working from home, your spouse is working from home if they're also working, and your children have their classes as well. So I've been shushed by my 4-year-old, when she has her class, and told to keep my voice down. When she's having her online classes. So that's that's really something, that we've kind of noticed. So they all so everyone is doing that within the, the working hours. So you have school and you have work. So that's been quite challenging, and that's been quite, different from the regular work from home. But what I have heard from feedback from a lot of my colleagues is they do enjoy they do appreciate the fact that there is a routine to going to office. You wake up in the morning, you get dressed, you go to a certain place, you finish your work, and then you come home. So the kind of work life and the home life is clearly segregated as much as possible. With the work from home, that's probably gone right now. It's kind of just melding into the hours and just kind of all doing it in one, 12 to 14 hour perhaps time frame. So every day. So yeah, that's been a challenge.
And what about you, Jonas?
I guess it's quite similar of what has been mentioned. I mean, at Merck we had quite a flexible working model, and thankfully we the whole team I work with, and more or less the whole company is well prepared, because we have mobile devices, we have digital files we can work with from wherever we are. In so far, it has not been a dramatic change, but after now 7 weeks of working from home, it created its own atmosphere, and the balance of family, of homeschooling, even the cooking is a challenge. A lot of restaurants in our area are closed, of course, yeah, and so you need to organize your daily life more or less in parallel. And my perception is that the amount of calls and online meeting clearly increased. And within my team, we start the day with a call all together. And from last week on, we even have a joint exercise we organized simply in order to provide some structure. I had colleagues last week, they didn't know which day it is, which shows a bit people are keen to go back to the office more or less for the social contacts, for the meeting the colleagues, and maybe having even some distance to the craziness at home. I mean, I have 3 little girls, which have their own schedule, of course, but it's a bit chaotic sometimes, I must admit. Yeah.
But so tell me this, Ronald, I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think this has helped in perhaps psychologically creating flatter organizations? Because all of a sudden, in the pre-COVID world, we had the option of creating, the distinction between that which was the personal and that which was the professional. We were able to create these distinctions and not let the lines blurred. But now, by force, those lines are getting blurred. And do you think the fact that, the hierarchical nature of organizations stands to get diluted because of the scenario we're all in? And is that good for teamwork? Is that good in the long run? How do you see it?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think it's well, I mean, for those who know me, I think I'm always quite open about who I am and what my private life looks like. So I think in this way, it's not a big change, but I've seen more of my colleagues to some extent than I had before. I mean, I've now seen their kids and their husbands and their wives, and it has made I think it has made a difference, right? I mean, as a Dutch person, hierarchy is not something that is, you know, very top of mind for me in the first place. But I mean, if you're the boss, some people will treat you as the boss because of, you know, for cultural reasons or what other reason. And I do see that. I wouldn't say it's changing, but I think people are more comfortable that they know more about others' lives than maybe they volunteer to either offer themselves before or to ask even themselves. And I think that's a good thing, right? I mean, I don't see it as I mean, I have a colleague, she has several kids at home, and sometimes when we have a video conference, there is one of them in the picture frame, and she can be a bit apologetic, and I say, this is your life. I mean, there's, you know, it's that's it. I do not at all mind. I mean, don't feel that this is not professional or not done. I mean, this is your reality. I mean, just because I have a flower field behind me and no kids running around, doesn't mean that we all need to do this, right? Everybody comes with their own, and I think you see more of the flavor of the people. And I would say, I mean, remarkably, you know, I set up a group chat. So, you know, every morning we say good morning, and every weekend we wish each other a good evening, good weekend. And there's a lot of gifs or gifs or whatever you call them going around. So we have fun together. We reach out to each other. We ask how people are. And it's a very, you know, it's very harmonious. It's very a very good team atmosphere, I would say. And that's, you know, I think that's actually in maybe to some extent an improvement from before. And I think it's a combination of all those factors, right? You end up in someone's living room nowadays when you call them. Yeah.
And coming to you, Cecilia, I want to ask you, do you think this really is likely to have a long-term impact on the way the contribution of women is seen? Because a lot of times we've seen women just simply drop out of the workforce for the simple reason that you know, their organizations don't support work from home, or they have all of these responsibilities and they're not able to manage, and there is generally a lack of sympathy towards that. Do you think that women who've dropped out from the workforce are now going to have the ability to come back in, or at least to have their situations viewed more favorably on account of everyone being in this forced scenario where, you know, everyone's had to do it? Do you think those barriers will go?
I think so. I think it's a good chance that can happen, because I think that's what I see in our company, that just like Roland said as well, it's you're more in touch with the private sides of your colleagues, and that also includes that if you have small kids, you might not be able to, you know, come to the office as often as your colleagues with older children. So I think that this is absolutely something that we should build upon. I can feel in my organization there is an absolute reluctance to allowing people to work from home, but as we said before, now it's just happened, and everybody can see that it does work out. So we can do it. And obviously, I am certain that women can actually benefit from this. Absolutely.
So, in other words, a lot of the traditional rigidity and you know, unwillingness to try new ways of doing things, which characterize you know, the way our profession is structured, perhaps will have to be rethought at the end of this. But I mean, and anybody can take this, just throwing it open. It's a question that's come in from somebody in the audience to say that do you see this as impacting a hiring freeze in, you know, all your industries as a whole? Do you see this as in the long term, you know, sort of resulting in hiring freezes? Do you see those sort of impacts, or do you think you know, that's going to blow over and it's not that long term?
I can start. This happened 1 week into the lockdown. An absolute hiring freeze. Even people who were scheduled for a final interview, it was all scrapped. So, but I think this is very industry, or even this is obviously going to depend from one company to the other, but I think that that's a risk, that things will be quite tough for a while now.
Sure. Does anyone want to take this? Okay. Coming back to the other question, and this is going out to Jonas in particular. Do you see new issues that you're having to face? So, for example, there would be health and sanitary regulations for the, newer health and sanitary regulations, or maybe, Ronald can answer this as well, because you've sort of had a lot of FMCG experience. So, the food industry, the hospitality industry, do you see that newer regulations are going to come in, which are going to need us to realign the way we advise businesses? Is that something that you see as a lasting impact going forward?
Well, I would say the healthcare industry is already very regulated in almost all countries. I would not see a bigger impact. It might even be the opposite, because now we are all searching for vaccines and potential treatments of the COVID-19 disease, that regulators might be quicker and might grant more exceptions to be successful, and this would then have an impact on especially the studies we need to undertake to prepare the market launch of products. Yeah, so I guess in our case, I would not see any increase in regulation. Of course, if you look at what is allowed in terms of traveling, in terms of all the nice conferences we attended, and more that type of aspect, I personally see a long time where this will not return back to normal. And of course, in that regard, there is some thinking within the company, of course, as well, what is needed and what not. Yeah. But our industry-specific regulations, I would not see a big change in regulations. Yeah.
Sure. And what about you, Ronald? Do you think personal meetings, large meetings, people are not going to be attracted to them anymore? Do you really see that as a long-term impact?
Well, I think people are probably more attracted to them maybe now because they need the social interaction, right? I think the logistics and the travel that Jonas also mentioned, I think that's going to have an impact, and we probably know. I mean, we talk about we all get invitations from meetings that are cancelled, postponed, or go virtual, such as one of the INTA programs now. I think we're all trying to figure out now what it. I mean, and I talked to my team about this today as well. In a small group, right? What is it you really miss in this situation? What is it you really miss? I mean, what is it you miss from not having this social interaction? So that is anything from the coffee machine in the office to the whole from one conference room to another at an INTA annual meeting, or even the lift at work when you meet someone from the marketing team, so large meetings. I hope we'll find a way to get back to having them, even maybe if it's going to be hybrid with partly visual, virtual, and more in person. But I think for now, the logistics and the reality in terms of travel restrictions and also budget restrictions, I think it's going to have an impact, certainly for a while on those, unfortunately.
For sure. And coming back to, I mean, again, throwing this open to each one of you, I think where all of us naturally are interested to know from each one of you is what you think would be the way, both in the short term and the long term, you'd like to see your external counsels change the way they work. I mean, what is your advice? How, you can take it in any way you want, either in terms of how personally you would see your external counsels do things differently in light of the challenges, unique challenges posed here, or general tips to external counsels in terms of how you think they should be viewing their clients and partnerships at the end of this whole scenario.
I'm happy to take it if I
Sure,
if
go
I
ahead.
may. I mean, I would say first of all, now more than ever, be our partner, right? Don't think in monetary terms. If we're not sending you a lot of work, doesn't mean you're not important to us. So reach out, get in touch, check in, share something. And I see some very good examples. I mean, a lot of proactive information coming from our network around the world. Anything from office closures to deadline extensions, and the basics that you were expecting to hear. I mean, we ourselves, I think a month in the lockdown, we had a change in the team, so we decided to actually send the org chart and sort of a message of support and thanks for everybody continuing to work under different situations. And I got some really, really warm and pleasant responses that shows the appreciation from both sides, right, for each other. But I also think, it's a basic thing, but realize that everybody's working from home, right? So did you send us a soft copy of that, or did you just send a hard copy to the office because I won't be seeing it? Do you really need me to have that document legalized? Do you really need a hard copy of the document? I mean, think with us. And I think I said it before. I mean, IP is an investment in the future, and I think you, as private, as our outside counsel, you can help us investing in that future. And I think that, to me, I see sort of two angles to that. One is invest in our relationship. Ask me what my priorities are. Contribute more effective. But also, I would say on a local level, the country where you are based, invest in the IP infrastructure in your country. I think as we've seen, the whole world has moved online, and we're not going back. And I'm not going to be stuck again because I need to have something legalized. I'm not going to have to be stuck again because I need a hard copy. And to the extent that that countries have now moved there, great, and let's make sure it happens. But to the extent that your country is not yet there, be the advocate for that change. Be the advocate for harmonization, for removing the obstacles that exist in your country, to make sure that you get a better IP ecosystem. And we talked about the sort of budget cuts and everything. I mean, we need to prioritize. So if you're not willing to help create a better IP infrastructure ecosystem in your country, it may be that your country becomes less of a priority for us because of that. So don't think short term that you're having a decent income on something you're doing now that is going to be obsolete. Let's use this opportunity to really move the profession forward, to work towards harmonization, and to remove the obstacles that we all know exist in certain countries.
Sure. Cecilia.
Yeah, I fully agree with Ronald here. I think that working together with outside counsel shows very clearly who you have a great partnership with. And I think it's a question of outside counsel listening to maybe harsh decisions that we had agreed on doing a project. We can't do it anymore because of the budget cuts. And I think that kind of understanding is very important, because things will pick up, things will get better. And that's when we want to be able to continue with the great relationship that we have. And I think that's the most important for us, that we know that in certain jurisdictions we will be cutting back a lot of enforcement activities, for example, that we've been undertaking. So I'm just hoping for the outside counsel to understand that this is, for us, it's quite a difficult period of time.
Varun, how would you like your outside counsel to better partner with you?
I think some of the best advice and legal services we've received has been during the last few months. I think some of our law partners have really stepped up, been proactive, sent us information saying this is how this will affect your office, your particular office, your industry. And they've been very good to reach out to us and let us know in advance what some of the potential problems might be. And that's been greatly appreciated, internally in the organization, because it's given us a lot of time to think. It's not something that we're reacting to. They've obviously sent in advance saying this is something that could happen, whether it's the lockdown, whether it's any aspect of COVID, or whether, a deadline extension, anything. They have been proactive, and they've sent us, measures that we can take to mitigate some of the risks. So that's been very, very proactive. And some of it we haven't even asked. So that's something we've really, appreciated. A lot of them have been very supportive on budgets. They do understand the situation themselves. So they're willing to, kind of trim their budgets, trim their fees, give us discounts. And that helps us justify to our finance team why we want to engage with external counsel on this particular project at this given time. So I think that's been something smart that a lot of these external counsels that we work with have done. So that's greatly been appreciated. And they know, or they do suspect, that hopefully once this is over, it'll be back to business as usual, and some of the purse strings will loosen, and we will go back to the typical projects that we undertake with them, where they will support us. So I think they do have that long-term perspective, in mind as well. So yeah, it's been good so far. No complaints from our side.
Yunus, we've heard a bunch of different takeaways. What's your top advice to external counsel?
Well, I mean, top advice would again be, and I can only echo, be our partner, yeah, and think from our perspective as well. And it has been mentioned. I like the idea to remove some of the administrative hurdles we are still facing in a lot of countries with legalized papers and stuff like this, because that is really one issue where we struggle at the moment, starting with the idea who can print out, how to meet, to sign a document, and then get it legalized or notarized. And maybe one very practical tip in that regard. So be early if there's a need for such type of documents, because it simply takes longer on our end as well for the time being. But I guess partnership and proactivity is key. And I must say I'm seeing that a lot. Yeah, it's great to see. And if we can then work all together to remove some of the administrative hurdles, that would be a great outcome out of the crisis. Yeah.
That's interesting that I think I've heard the echo of administrative hurdles from quite a few of you. And I do want to ask you this. It's sort of, one is obviously your external counsel on one hand, but the point is, have IP offices risen to the occasion? Have you seen changes in terms of, some of these procedural things, the legalizations, the notarizations and things? Do you find that IP offices have risen to the occasion to make life simpler for, IP owners, or do you think that that's not really happened? And, do you think that there is something to be said about perhaps organizations or, collaborative efforts of associations to actually start having conversations post-COVID with IP offices to say, perhaps have a protocol in place when something like this happens, to say, these are the things you can waive in order to make life easier for brand owners? I mean, have you been experiencing that? Have you seen proactive IP offices? Anybody?
Maybe I can take that. What I have seen that some offices, of course, it's much easier to extend deadlines now, and even as an exceptional rule to the normal, the formalistics might not be as harsh as they used to be. Mm-hmm. But it's currently in a stage of exceptional rule, and I guess if we see that this works, and I fully believe it works because it works in a lot of offices, but maybe not in others. Yeah, that would be a thing I guess we all could lobby, because it will make our life much easier.
Sure. In fact, I think a lot of instances that we've seen essentially are just, giving blanket extensions or because the office itself is not functioning at its full strength. So it's been a response of more like saying, okay, the deadline gets extended by a month, but it's not as if, you now have a simplified set of criteria to meet in order to adhere to that deadline. So any responses to that, Ronald?
No, it's something that I think when I see these emails about deadline extensions, I mean, I know that my team are working to make sure that they meet, let's say, the original deadline, just to make sure that we don't get bottlenecks at the end. But I think in terms of cases where you're waiting to see if an opposition is filed or if an appeal is filed by the other side, I mean, do expect some surprises, because some of the deadlines are very opaque, I would say, right, at the moment. But I think as an obvious way to make sure that people don't lose deadlines over something frivolous because of the situation. Now, of course, I think that's a very good proactive step that the offices have taken, and that's appreciated for sure.
And which of these changes, according to you, are here to stay in the profession? I mean, obviously, some of this is very short term in terms of, you know, the lowered staffing and the inability to meet deadlines, or the way in which we're all trying to manage in makeshift situations, the work from home, all of that. There is going to be a post-COVID world someday where Ronald could actually be sitting in front of a field of flowers, right? Though theoretically, I think in Rotterdam you still can, but unlike India where it's completely locked down. But you know, in that world, whenever we reach it, what are the changes, good or bad, that you think are here to stay? Cecilia?
Well, I think that there will be a different work world out there after COVID. I really think so. I think that one thing that I was thinking about, it's you see what's a good leader in this situation. Because I think that leadership in the real world or in the office, it's very different from a good leader the way that we're working now. And I think that it could also be that the way that a good leader acts now can actually set the standard for how a good leader will be perceived later on. I think that's an interesting thing. We talked a lot about how, you know, for how do you manage your team? How do you do it practically when you're not together, when you're not having those 10-minute chats by the coffee machine, but you're actually far away and you can only meet on the phone. So I think that's going to set some new standards, definitely. And then I think that the whole work from home, yeah, we covered that. I think that's gonna change a lot as well. And I think I've said this in the beginning as well. The whole CSR, I think it's going to be more important than before, because I think that people are craving, or the consumer is craving that sense that there is somebody out there who takes responsibility for you know, the climate, the world, how we are living, what's going to happen to all these people who are going to be very negatively impacted by the economic situation after the corona crisis. So I think that you know, the companies need to step up their game. I think there's going to be a different view on business. At least I would hope so, from a personal opinion.
Sure. So Jonas, when you would choose your external counsels, would you then give primacy in the post-COVID world to, say, firms who prioritize values? You know, are there going to be certain value propositions and standards of you know, how they do their business and what sort of values they prioritize, whether they have a CSR initiative? Are you going to give you know, some primacy to those factors when you choose your counsels in the future, or do you think that that's not something that's really going to happen?
I mean, that is what we or what we already did before the COVID crisis, I would say. Yeah. Of course, for us it was always a partnership, and you need to share certain values in order to work successfully together, and I guess that will simply continue. I agree with Cecilia that the crisis will shed light on certain aspects we might not have seen before as strongly as we might see it now, and that will of course influence all of us in the way we work together. But in terms of values, you always need to align on the way of doing business. And I mean, within our company, of course, we have a zero tolerance policy in terms of compliance issues like bribery and stuff like that. Yeah,
sure.
And this had been there, and this will simply not change. Yeah. But yeah, it might be difficult though to choose a new lawyer if there will not be so many live conferences. I mean, that was a big value to meet the whole family of IP at an INTA or PTFG conference. And if that will be different, I guess a lot of what we judge as a human being, simply having a live interaction, is missing.
Ronald, are you going to look for any particular values from your counsels? And also, are you going to look at issues like, what kind of technology dependence your counsels have going forward while selecting them in terms of assessing their ability to be leaner in terms of their deliverables?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think we would probably continue to use the same values that we had before, and when we selected them, and when we worked together and decided to continue the relationship for years. And I mean, many agents in our networks we've worked with for many years. I think, I mean, Cecilia mentioned, it's a test for leadership. I think it's a test for every relationship almost now, right? I think people show their true colors in a way, and not in a negative way, because people are just too busy to handle their life and worry about things that they need to worry about. So I understand everybody has priorities, but in the interactions that you have with people, I think you now start seeing people, you see who really you share the same values with. And so yeah, in terms of their technical capabilities, I think I've not been let down in that sense with counsel. It's just that I think I mean, video conferencing, I think has made such a leap in the past weeks that I think we'll do that much more. And I think the nice thing about video conferencing is that you'll see the body language, you'll see the responses. So I think a discussion with your outside counsel via video conference is going to be much more effective than an email or a phone call, because you see how they respond. You can move on when people get impatient, or but that's not the value, right? That's just a new way of working. So so I guess yes and no is the answer to your question.
Okay. And Varun, being from the mobile tech industry, do you see any disruptions in the way law firms end up doing business? Do you see any sort of useful disruptions as being the norm going forward in the legal industry?
Well, not too many disruptions. I don't think that's going to be the case here. I mean, as when you talked about law firms, I think we've worked with law partners who've been with us for years and years, associated with the brand, and there's always been alignment of values, and that's really come through even during this crisis as well, where they've been supportive of us. So whether they're able to engage with us using various online platforms, helping us, doing the filings through soft copies, whatever it is, we've seen clearly their ability to support us. But do I see any tech disruptions as such?
Do you see dispute resolution, for example, going online?
I think that can happen, but I think that also depends on how long this particular situation lasts. If this lasts longer and longer over a period of time in the region around the world, then it will become the norm. And that's something that we can expect to continue. But if this is a short-term, aspect, at least in our region, in the MENA region, in places like India and Africa, I don't suspect that everything will go online that quickly. It could be in Europe, it could be in the United States, it could be in markets like that. But in our regions, I think it would take a lot longer for something like that to happen.
Sure. And now a quick round of last words. That's all we have time for. Cecilia, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. No, I think it's really interesting discussions. I think there's a lot of things that we could discuss for a long time, but I think that as Ronald said, as long as everybody is taking care of their own loved ones and their family and friends and colleagues, of course, I think the rest, I think that everybody has shown that a lot of things that we said were absolutely impossible 6 months ago, it actually is possible, and you can do a lot more than you actually think you could.
Ronald?
What to say? Famous last words. You know, maybe be mindful now of what the good things are now, and make sure to keep those. Because at some stage, if we go back to, I mean, even if the new normal is not going to be the old normal, just remember what made this a very, you know, what was the good about this about the situation. I think again that comes back to the social part, and in your business relationships and in your employee, company, team, whatever relationships, don't underestimate the importance of those, and try already now to not just reach out to people, but also to replicate them, if it's virtually or otherwise, because it's a colleague of mine calls it the campfire. We all need the campfire, right? And so make sure you have one.
Yunus? Famous last words? Oops. Are you muted?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Sorry,
now
yeah, I
I'm
thought
back.
so.
Yeah. So
I was trying to use my powers as moderator to unmute you, but you did it yourself.
yes, here I am. So my last thought would be, it's maybe not a last word, that what I don't like in that whole discussion is this talking about the new normal, and I hesitate to accept simply because it's extraordinary times we all are in right now, and I have some resistance to accept this being the new normal, because I simply enjoyed so much the interaction with the colleagues and friends and people. This for me is a personal, not learning out of the crisis, but a personal perception that I want to return somehow to those human interactions much more. Yeah, and despite all the digital possibilities, you realize what it means to be a human being. Yeah.
Thank you. And Varun?
I think the biggest takeaway from this episode is that, you know, work from home can be productive. It's something that can be useful. So that's something I've clearly noticed. From an industry perspective, I think you're going to see a lot more online sales. I think the online channel is going to become important in our region as well, which it was in places like the US and Europe. But I think even in the Middle East, North Africa region, you are going to find a strong push for online sales as well across the industry. A lot more use of technology. I think that's going to be widespread as well. This is for online payments, you know, ordering, e-commerce is really going to take off. So I think these will be the impact from a COVID perspective or our industry as well. Like I said, from an office perspective, work from home, I think the way the organization has come together to support one another, that's been really something nice to see internally as well. So there has been some good from all this, and yeah, that's what I would say is my last words.
Thank you very much. On that positive note, thank you all so much for agreeing to be on this panel. This was wonderful. And thank you all for having been patient listeners. See you on the other side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.